This has been unlike any campaign you have ever run, I would think.
It is unique, yes, very unique. It's been somewhat frustrating because in all prior campaigns, most of it for me was going door to door, engaging people in conversations, answering questions. And I really enjoy that aspect of campaigning, just being out and about, talking to people. Now that obviously is not possible, and we're having to kind of pivot campaigns with, social media and things of that nature. So I've had a crash course in social media, and I'm getting pretty good at it, I think. I'm planning to do my first live Facebook shot. Hopefully I'm going to set it up for Wednesday to talk about some of the questions I've got from the environmental community and give people opportunities to also bring up other questions. And hopefully we'll do a mailing, because again, the other aspect of this is the date changed. It finally got set up on when we were going to vote, the 19th. And then the question was on the 19th, what we were going to do, i.e. with the electoral board. And of course, now they've decided that instead of opening up all the polling places in the city, they're going to limit it to the Dorothy Hart Center in Ward 2. And now we have to get that message out on top of everything else we're trying to do.
It just is, so much of what you've always done is door to door in every neighborhood.
In a local election, that's what the campaign should be, is getting in front of the people and giving them their opportunity to ask questions. Or for me, in a prior campaign, we had approved a housing development which a certain neighborhood was not too thrilled about. So when I started my campaign, I started in that neighborhood, and yes, I got some very frank comments, but that again, that's an opportunity to try to explain what happened and why it happened. I'm not asking people necessarily to agree with me all the time, but at least understand what the thinking was behind things. And I've always found that to be a great way to deal with any issue, is to sit down and engage, especially with people who don't necessarily agree with you.
Well, and that I was just going to say, with issues, you have dealt with all of that, and always you've sat down with all sides to try to understand it.
I've received endorsements from prior council colleagues, regional colleagues, state colleagues, 3 former mayors of Fredericksburg. And while it's humbling to have that support, to me, what is more important when you look at that is it's not one group of people. It's not your typical, all Democrats support this person, so they're going to come out and support them and endorse them, and the Republicans. I have Republicans, I have Democrats, I have preservationists, I have environmentalists, I have developers, a great cross-section of the community. And I try to do, when I deal with an issue in the city, to consider every aspect, because frankly, even people who disagree with me sometimes have frankly good ideas, and said, well, what about this? And I'd go, I didn't think about that. Maybe we've got to find a way to incorporate it. And I think the comment in this campaign thus far that I'm most proud of is somebody who commented on one of the Facebook posts and said, as a business owner, we support Matt Kelly, not because he agrees with us, but because he's fair. He looks at the issue and he makes a decision and he explains position, and he's fair. And I think that's what I'm probably, up to this point, and all the comments and all the endorsements that I've received, has been the comment I've been most proud of, is just a statement, I'm fair.
You spend a lot of time on every issue, big or small.
I try to do my homework, and a lot of times it's not me necessarily doing the research, because one thing I've learned of being in Fredericksburg as long as I have is there are people out there who have a level of expertise that I do not have, and I will call them up. Back in the day, with river issues, you would call FOR and talk to John Tippett. Issues of museums, you had Jake Jacobs, who ran and set up the museum in Dulles.
Yeah.
And you have this level of expertise in this community, and it's just knowing who to call and what questions to ask is more important than necessarily trying to learn everything. Is just know who to talk to. And I've tried to do that as much as I possibly can.
With what the city's dealing with now, and what every locality is dealing with, it's unprecedented. And I guess you've brought out at council meetings and work sessions, this isn't going to be just a budget cycle. This is years. We
had a crash course back in the housing bubble burst, 2008, 2009. And it took us a number of years, not months, to get back out and dig ourselves out of that. This situation will probably, well, not probably, it will be harder to get through than that time frame. And I think there needs to be an understanding in the community that we still have some hard times ahead that we're going to have to deal with. But at the same time, I want to say that the way this community has come together in dealing with this issue has been absolutely fantastic. And basically, if I were to make a request to the community, is still some tough times ahead, but if we continue to work together, and that's going to be the key factor in this, and understanding what's going on and why it's going on, I think we will definitely come out of this a better city. But it's going to take a little bit of time.
You look at what the downtown has done as far as is pulling together, and it's going to be tough times for the downtown, but you've seen that in the downtown of really a togetherness.
They have really come together. And again, everybody talks about the 1980s when everything was bad, and then we were able to come out of that. We will come out of this again. And again, you're right. The way everybody has responded to this and helping the local businesses and keep them up and supporting them has been absolutely fantastic. But frankly, we are going to end up losing some of those businesses, and the budget is going to get harder and harder to deal with. We were already in a situation even prior to this because we're an independent city in Virginia. We're a victim of our size. You know, we have all these requirements, yet we don't have the tax base that a Spotsylvania and a Stafford has. And that's going to be harder to deal with in maintaining a level of service. So there is going to have to be a frank conversation here at some point. You know, we have core duties. Public safety and public health are critical. That's what we're here for. But there will be other things that, frankly, are going to have to be either postponed or we're going to have to step back from over the next coming years. I would say I would figure it's going to take us, like it did in the last time, at least a good 3 to 4 years for us to get totally out of this and back on a level playing field.
Boy, and those conversations about things that you do have to step back from and change, those are hard conversations.
Well, we've already had a very hard conversation. You know, we have furloughed employees, and that is something nobody wants to do. You know, we pared down our staff. As many people say, well, how many people do we really have working? We pared down our staff during the housing bubble, and people were doing a lot more for equal or less salary. And now not only have we furloughed people, we have cut salaries, and the people that are still here are going to have to step up to the plate and fill in on other things. And that's a tough thing to do. And I really applaud our employees for, you know, basically understanding what the situation is and willing to do their part. But it's going to take some time. The other aspect of this is going to be, we have been told 4 to 8 million is our loss for this year. We don't know that number yet. And even with the cuts that we've done to date, we haven't reached the $4 million figure. And with the cuts we've made now, when you talk about what's next, what if it is 5 million, what if it is 6 million, then you can start seeing get some sense of the decisions that we're going to have to make. Now we have a strong reserve, and we will probably use that reserve. My guess is if we get beyond where we are now, we will go into reserve. But using reserve for operational costs basically just kind of pushes that cost out, and you're going to have to face it, you know, at some point. So again, tough decisions, but I think if we could be as forthcoming as we can to the public and explaining, if we get here, we're going to have to do this. If we get here, we're going to have to do that. And so at least people have an understanding of what we're facing and can plan for what we're facing. I'm hoping by the next council meeting, we'll have a better handle on what our revenue picture is. You know, that's been the question in every meeting we've had since this started. What's the revenue picture? Staff keeps saying we don't really quite know yet to be able to project it out.
What made you decide to run for re-election? When you decided to make this call, this was on nobody's radar. We'd be living in the situation we're in.
Well, actually, the primary reason for running for me was a concern then, which is now even a greater concern now that we're dealing with the COVID-19 situation. And as the city develops, I mentioned earlier, we were already under financial stress to begin with. And for the city to be able to prosper going into the out years, we do need to rethink economic development and how we do it. An interesting conversation I had, and I have nothing against restaurants. I think are great. I have my favorites that I go to regularly and everything else. But I was talking to one of my colleagues in the counties about the fact that we had furloughed and what's their status and what they're doing. And the comment was, no, we're not talking about furloughs yet. And kind of as a side said, glad we're not as dependent on meals tax and emissions taxes as you are. And while I'm a great proponent of tourism, that's a very telling comment. And basically we do need to, as tourism is very important and critical to us in the long term, we do need to diversify our tax base a little bit more, which means we're going to have to be a lot more proactive in what we bring to the city to meet certain obligations long term. Again, we make a lot of money when we're successful with tourism, but at the same time, our revenue sources are really dependent on the economy or events like this, so it fluctuates. We got to start looking at how do we push or level out that level of fluctuation, and that means we're going to have to be a lot more proactive in economic development. But the other aspect of it that concerns me is we've approved some projects, and I'm not necessarily opposed to the projects, but we have given large incentives to, and some of them are very large buildings and have caused some discussion within the community, because I think maintaining the character of the city, the historic small town character, is critically important. It's the one thing we have that nobody around us has that we can really bank on as the region continues to grow. And the selling point to the council has always been, getting back to the point of financial stress, we'll get you X hundreds of thousands of dollars of new revenue, and if you make that promise, we're kind of, oh wow, we need the money, yeah, we'll go with the project. I think that has some short-sightedness to it. I think we need to be a little bit more involved, and in particular with what we bring into the city. And what that really requires is a better relationship and a more tighter relationship in working together, not agreeing with always, with the development communities and the people who own the land, and saying they're market driven. What's the market right now? But that market is not necessarily what we want as a city. So the conversation has to come, what are we going to have to do to get you, the landowners and developers, to start looking at things that we really want to have? And what are we as a city going to have to do to make that happen? If it is incentives or it is some type of tax proposal that we've done in the past, those are the conversations we need to be having now, and we need to be having them sooner rather than later, especially going forward.
You've talked about, you just mentioned it, about the character, and you've been big over the years of, on each project, we can't lose it, because if we lose it, we lose it. And historic preservation has been a huge concern of yours, of things that have been lost.
Well, what has always been interesting to me, and we have made great strides in preservation since the inception of the historic district. We now have a preservation plan. We established an ARB. We're currently we passed an archaeological ordinance. We're doing a lot on paper. It's getting that mindset into the day-to-day operations of the city, which is something we need to work on. Because if you look at the last big controversies that we've had with the demolition of building, the damage to the mountain, the riverfront park, and everything else like that, there was city involvement in all those things. And I've said this publicly before. I've sat in meetings where my colleagues go, this should never happen again. It's, like the third or fourth time we've said it. So we do need to take these time and effort in which we spent on putting the preservation plan together, the archaeological ordinance together, and things like that, and really make them meaningful, living, working documents. And I don't think we're quite there yet.
Schools, and with the growth that the city's had, I know schools and the future there. What a new school or how to deal with schools is a big thing. Schools
is a core service that we provide to the community. I put schools right up there with police, fire, public works, because water, sewer issues, and everything else like that. And that has been, again, it gets back to the fact that we're a small city. We have a lot of requirements, and because of the way the state has put the formula together for funding, most of that burden falls on us locally. Compared to the counties, they get most of their money from the state, where we get very small portion of our overall budget from the state. And right now, there's no indication that's going to change. So we're going to have to deal with these issues. And that's one of the reasons we started the School Board Council Working Group, the mayor and I, and the school board and our staffs coming together on a regular basis to talk about these issues. But one of the things we're going to have to start talking about, and I agree that we need to have more money and more focus in the classroom and for the kids and for space and things of that nature. So part of the conversation is going to have to be, both at the city level and at school board level, especially now that we have the COVID-19 situation and how it's going to impact our budget, is how do we better streamline or provide the services necessary? Do we need to have a finance department and the school needs a finance department? Do we have a maintenance department? They have a maintenance department. Are there areas that we can start? And I'm not saying we start laying people off or anything and or shutting things down. What I'm saying is maybe we start saying in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to move in this direction. Through attrition, as people leave, we won't replace those positions, or we'll hire that position in the city and start looking at those savings there. And frankly, it's the same with the city itself. There are things that we can do. We have a lot of constitutional officers. We have one office sending out the bills. We have one office collecting the money. Is that really the most efficient way to do it? So I'm hoping, as we, every disaster has its opportunities, and one opportunity here is for us to really sit down and look at the way we provide services, both at school level and city level, and if we can make some changes to save a little bit so we can put more money in the classroom or into a new building. And I think, we're still looking at that. That conversation is not going to end just because of COVID-19. It's going to be harder to address, but it is something, frankly, we have to address, and we will as we continue forward. The
Chatham Bridge is right behind us, and it's about to go away.
Well, it was about to go away before we did anything with the number of potholes and all the problems that bridge had. So that's nothing new, really.
You and I stood out there. You did a little Saturday morning briefing for reporters that wanted to come on 4 or 5 years ago now.
On a beautiful day like this.
We did, and we looked at it. You have always, and especially transportation is something that's been one of your passions, but also you've had the ability to look ahead and to look ahead and project out and things, and nobody could have projected this. But there have been projects that I do look at the city. You've talked about a number of things that over the years the city's gotten involved with, and and now with the situation we have, you might have wished that you didn't have some of the money committed that you have.
Well, we can wish and we can wish and wish, and I'm not going to get into we shouldn't have built this, we shouldn't have done that. The fact of the matter is they're here, they're there, the cost has been incurred. We have to deal with the situation at hand. But I think there are ways, as we've talked about, how can we better streamline? Can we look at projects and find either different ways to do it? Or one of the areas I think that we have really need to do more work on is there's a lot of funding out there. Right now we're talking about environmental issues and fossil free, which I think is an important goal to strive for. In my conversations with the environmental professionals, and I've had a number of them, because again, it's not an area that I'm totally familiar with, so I'm trying to get up to it. And one of the first things I said, what do we need to be doing right now? And the answer is, the city has not been very good at acquiring. There's a number of funding sources, state and federal, out there that we have not really been good at going after. And that's the type of conversations we need to start having now. What's out there? What do we need to bring to bear on not only environmental issues, but necessarily school issues, or potentially regular day-to-day public works issues? Is there a better way to do things? And what is the resources out there that we could acquire to help bring that about? And a classic example for me is GWRC, our regional group, wants to do a environmental master plan. And there was an issue of matching. And FOR was doing a project, and we were able to take the labor hours from that project and put it towards our match so we can move forward with doing a strategic environmental plan. Building those kind of relationships and strengthening those kind of relationships will be critical as we move forward.
I guess the people are encouraged to vote absentee. You have to remember when you get your ballot to send it back in or drop it off.
Well, you can drop it off in the big red box in front of the Executive Plaza. I know a lot of people said, well, I went to the City Hall and I didn't see the box. It's Executive Plaza. And I'm also understanding the United States Postal Service, if you put your ballot in the mail, you do not have to put postage on it, and they will deliver it. But I think for me, I've already been down. And actually, I was talking to the registrar. I was the first vote in the red box when it was first put out. And of course, now we will be voting on the 19th. but it will be at Dorothy Hart Center. But they are really encouraging people to go. It's fredericksburgva.gov/534/registrar-voter-registrar, and then you can get online and you can request your ballot.
Well, I'll give you the last word. Why should people vote for Matt Kelly?
I think I've worked in this job for a lot of years, and I want to emphasize the word work. I don't just support things. Once I'm involved in it, I put full bore into getting it done. But more importantly, I think, is my ability to work with differing views. I don't look at any situation as us versus them. It's they have interest, this group has interest. How do we bring those interests together? And I think in the coming years, one, with going through the COVID-19 situation, things are going to get harder to do. And we need to have that level of collaboration, not only within the council, but within the community and organizations outside the community. And I think I've done quite a bit of that over the past few years, and would like to continue to do that. Again, this is my city, came to school here, got married here. Both my wife were in the military, and we looked at this place and said, we're going to raise our families here. We've gone through raising our children here into the grandchildren phase, and I have no intention of leaving it. And it's a community I really do love and want to do everything I can to help it.